Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Verville. Still going strong with this project and still a lot of ideas and plans for the future. Today I'm especially excited because we are tackling an area that has been bothering me for a really long time already. And I also had very specific plans for it. Of course, I'm talking about the lakeside of Verville. This is a really important area because it kind of defines the look of the whole city. Unlike other cities, Verville doesn't have a distinctive skyline or something like that really defines the character of the city. But we have still something like the focal point or the primary view of the whole city. And that's this lakeside front, together with a very prominent walkway along the shoreline, and of course a little harbor for passenger cruise ships that will drive or float around the lake here. So yeah, basically like in Zurich. The real-life counterpart would be the Bürkliplatz area in Zurich, which is usually quite busy all the time because there's this tram exchange in real life as in Verville. And it's also a very nice spot for tourists as well because the view is pretty neat with the mountains in the background and the lake in front of you and all these really nice looking ships driving around. And yeah, all in all, it's just a really nice area, so I wanted to spend this place a little bit of extra love in Verville. And yeah, I maybe should have split that one up in 2 episodes because there's a lot going on, a lot of high detail builds. But I figured I wanted to show you the finished area as a whole and not just a little part of it. As we all know by now is that it's really difficult in City Skylines to build very close to the in-game water, but it just looks really good when you can build something in very close approximation to the actual water, so it looks like the walkway is just 1 meter above it or something like that. But yeah, the game just generates so high waves all the time, so you have to find the sweet spot that no floods occur, but the gap between the walkway and the water still seems to be pretty small. I achieved that with using a variety of dock assets. They are all buried in my collection somewhere if you want to find them. And that's basically what you saw me doing in the first 2 or 3 minutes of this video. I placed down these wall props as well as the surface props very close to the water and also put a pedestrian path on top of it. Unfortunately, these pedestrian paths cannot be altered to a non-terrain conforming version, so I had to use terrain conforming networks to push the ground back down and create this sharp transition from land to water. But in this case here, you just saw on the screen, I used a cue wall asset, which is basically just an invisible key with a ploppable pavement prop on top of it, and in combination with a Revo's stone wall, which as always looks just insanely good. So this corner of the lakeside here, I wanted to have this museum building. I think it's the Johannes Museum from Dresden. It's actually pretty funny because I placed that building there already a year ago, so it has just been sitting there for quite some time now. But I think it looks really good in that corner because this array of building here, it kind of forces this main road back inside the city a bit, and it makes a really nice shape, and I just love that look. I also turned all of these buildings very bright white, so they look like very luxurious historical apartment buildings, and also detailed the backyard a bit with these stone stairs, and of course I placed down a lot of pedestrian path along it so it looks really busy. And I also did some nice detailing, for instance a restaurant along the pier, and placed down a lot of greenery. Up next was the tram exchange. This guy definitely needed an overhaul. I don't know if you remember, but we built this guy a really long time ago already. And yeah, the interesting thing here is the technique I was talking about in the episode where we built this little village outside of Verville. So I used these pedestrian path assets only for their texture. Reason for that being is that I wanted to distinguish the platforms for the tram from the ground texture around that station. And it's just really finicky to get all the cobblestone decals to be lined up perfectly and not overlapping, sea-fighting, or appearing on this slightly lower level where the asphalt texture is for the road. So the idea behind this was that I could kind of cheat a bit to make it easier for me to plop down the cobblestone decals, because if you place down the cobblestone decals and obviously turn them to PO, they only show on the level you plop them down as well as a tiny bit below them. And because the pedestrian paths are a tiny bit higher than the plaza behind it, the decals don't show on this tram platform now. And I also didn't have to adjust every single decal to follow along that nice gentle curve the trams make there. Of course, I had to adjust the shape of the decals on the side where the road is, but the road is almost a straight line there, and then it's much easier to get these decals adjusted with PO. And the area where I had to adjust the decals a bit so they meet the road in a nice way, I hid that with a hedge, so this part is covered and it just looks really nice like that. After that was accomplished, I turned back to the little park area in front of the museum, which by the way I imagined to be the city theater or something in that direction, and I started to detail the park with some usual park assets like benches and trash cans. And I already paid some attention to the lighting, so it also looks good by night. And surprisingly, this curb network really added to the whole area. It creates that nice transition from the walkway or street to the park. And yeah, nothing usual going on there, just the usual park detailing with a lot of colorful flowers and bushes, greenery everywhere. And of course I also wanted to make this park being used, so I placed down a lot of pedestrian path across of it. And as you can see, over there is also the exit of the park with a yellow crosswalk over the main street in a typical Swiss manner. I thought by creating this crosswalk over there and having the park in between, more people would walk through the park. But I don't know, for some reason this whole area isn't too busy yet, so I will definitely try to place down some more block buildings in that general area, or maybe paint over it with the park life thingy, even though I'm not sure if that helps attracting more people. Oh yeah, here I went a bit overboard with the crosswalk and intersection detailing. As you can see, I used the intersection marking tool to make this whole intersection looking so much better than one could ever do with just using decals and props and whatnot. But a little thing I'm especially proud of is this middle section for the pedestrians. I kind of extended these medians with the expressway pillars squeezed way together and placed some, I don't know what it was, maybe it was a prop bench I stretched to create a surface because I couldn't use ploppable asphalt, otherwise the intersection markings would have appeared on top of them. And I also placed down some arrows and these black yellow thingies to guide the drivers where to drive. Oh wow, this garbage truck armada there. That's insane. I should really replace the vanilla garbage trucks, they look so bad. But anyway, way more important than these crosswalks is the stuff shown on the screen right now. So I was really not sure at first what to do with this little plaza here. So I started off with this round French building. I'm not sure what exactly it is, but it just looks good. And then I tried to arrange trees in a manner that looks kind of symmetrical and nice, but I quickly realized that it just looks, I don't know, too artificial. So I decided to go for something Verumpositor did already in his guest build episode. Yeah, so I wanted to create a little market area. And that was actually a really fun build because the props are so freaking tiny and it was just so finicky to do, but also so much fun because it just looks so high detail. It's actually insane, these props made by Jess, I think, that just look insanely good. And yeah, so I tried to fill this whole plaza with all of these props, tents, and even some market vendors. And it really added a lot to the whole area. It looks so much more alive now and less empty. And I also changed the whole look of the plaza by getting rid of some of these smaller planters and trees and placing down way bigger trees and planters I downloaded from the workshop. Now back to the lakeside. I wanted to have this general area in 2 layers kind of. So first of all we have the layer where the main road is, and along that we have this little corner with some kind of fast food shop and some parking possibilities for tourists and whatnot, and also this really cute looking merry-go-round asset. I just tried to fill this area with stuff I also saw there in real life, so I also placed down a public toilet there. I just tried to make everything looking really nice with these cobblestone decals. And I also downloaded this chestnut tree from the workshop, which looks really good. I really enjoy that asset. It's a quite tall tree with a very high resolution texture. Yeah, but now we are finally working on the nose piece or overhead crossing, or however you want to call this. And for that I wanted to use a different texture, namely this dock texture. I knew that this build is gonna be a bit tricky because the small cruise ships in Zurich, they have a very distinctive look, and there's nothing like that on the workshop, unfortunately. I knew that I have to come up with a solution somehow. Yeah, I finally decided to download the tree and vehicle prop mod or something like that. And I was a bit afraid of it because this guy turns every single vehicle and tree you subbed to into a prop asset. And yeah, I was afraid that my game is gonna crash or not even load because yeah, all of a sudden you have so many more assets in your game because of that. But for some reason it worked surprisingly well. I didn't even notice a big increase in loading time and whatnot. But thanks to that mod, I have now a prop version of these ships. I think some of them are even vanilla ferries, I guess. But there's also this very shallow ferry thingy, which looks exactly like a type of ship we have here in Zurich. And I also downloaded this oldish looking steamship, which doesn't look necessarily great by all means now. It's actually a really old asset, but it's yeah, what are you gonna do? You have to work with the stuff that's available to you. But I used Titan's technique and placed the color rectangle on top of the texture to darken the look of the asset a bit, and it's looking okay in my opinion. So yeah, tree and vehicle prop mod, that was my workaround for not having a huge variety of ship assets on the workshop, which is a shame in my opinion. I really hope someone is gonna do some nice ship assets. But as the name indicates, and I already talked about it, the mod also converts trees to props. And that was really helpful, because now I could finally place some really nice looking trees very close on this promenade, which also matches the looks from real life. I don't exactly know how these trees can grow in that area, because they really seem to grow straight out of the stone wall from time to time. And they also create a big mess with the ground and the cobblestones in real life. They create surface distortion in real life as well, so maybe it's not the wisest choice to plant trees there, but it just looks really good. So another thing that occurred to me while I was browsing through Google Earth was that along those piers there were often some kind of smaller buildings, which are restaurants or nightclubs or just ticket booth for the cruise ships. Speaking of Google Earth, maybe I should show you a close-up shot from that area. Okay, so now to the last part of today's episode. Another thing I discovered was a very strange looking kind of cross-shaped structure reaching into the lake. And when I did some research on that, I found out that this was a yacht club. And then I got curious and also searched on Google Images for some more detailed pictures of that building. And it really looked like a cut-off boat somehow, with some wood-covered terraces around it, reclining chairs and umbrellas and all that stuff. And it just looked really interesting and nice. And I thought that thing would fit perfectly in today's episode, because I didn't want to have just a straight shoreline, which would look a bit boring in my opinion. So I tried to create from time to time these structures that are reaching into the water, like the 2 or 3 piers we built before. And I thought this is a nice variety to that. So what I did was I took that converted ship asset and got rid of the lower part of the ship. And then I converted that pier we built before and got rid of the connection to the land. And instead of having one continuous pier, I created this other overhead crossing, which looks really good in my opinion, and created some kind of a pathway to that pier island thingy with that half of a ship on top of it. And I don't know, in my opinion, it turned out really cool. It's a very unique look and actually matches the real life counterpart pretty well. And this whole creation gave me another idea to create these kind of rafts you can see all around the Lake Zurich. It is usually used in public swimming pools, which are just closed off areas along the lake. And they often have these kind of rafts with this wooden floor and barrels filled with air to make this whole thingy float. And yeah, that's something I'm really proud of. I think that turned out great and it looks really good. And I don't really know why exactly these smaller ships around that yacht club were spread out so far, but I just recreated what I saw on Google Earth. And then I also placed a really big yacht ship right next to the clubhouse. Created a little sky bridge, or however you want to call that. Detailed that whole place with some umbrellas and reclining chairs, and yeah, that was it. No, actually I totally forgot that I added something else, because I also realized that the shoreline has a quite different color than the open water, or however you want to call it. The water color along the shoreline looks a lot brighter. There's this turquoise color to the water. So I just used ploppable asphalt, turned it into PO, scaled it up and changed the color to match what I saw on Google Earth and other pictures. And yeah, I think that also really adds to the shoreline here. And then I decided to also detail the underwater area a bit more, and that's why I placed down some more rocks to add some shadows and interesting shapes to it. But yeah, guys, now for real, this has been it for today's episode of Verville. Really hope you enjoyed and wanted to encourage you to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment, that's always good for the YouTube algorithm. I want to explicitly thank Jason and James for being my Patreons and enjoying all of these videos with early access. From now on, I try to always have one video as a backlog, which is available for my patrons. And yeah, other than that, just the usual. Subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on Instagram if you always want to be up to date. And yeah, other than that, I'm gonna leave you with some nice cinematic shots from the area. Take care and hope to see you in the next one.